Man, every time you think the conversation around the Baltimore Ravens might finally shift to something new, the offensive line drags us right back in. It is wild how this group manages to stay at the center of every discussion in the city, no matter how many weeks go by, and the funny thing is, this time it feels a little different, almost like there is a quiet storm building behind the scenes. When John Harbaugh drops one of those subtle hints about being open to change, you can practically feel the fan base leaning in, waiting to see if he really means it or if it is just another one of those classic Harbaugh phrases that never lead anywhere. And look, with the way the offense has been sputtering lately, it is hard not to focus on that line. Lamar Jackson has taken a beating. The run game has not found any rhythm. And every time you think things might be turning a corner, another breakdown happens up front. It is tough watching an offense that is supposed to be explosive struggle. Because the foundation is cracked, you can blame play calling, you can blame injuries. But when the guys in the trenches are getting pushed around, everything else falls apart. What really caught people off guard this week was the decision to make Emory Jones active. For the first time, fans saw his name on the list and instantly began buzzing, ready to see what the rookie could bring to a unit that desperately needs fresh energy. Then the game ended and he had not taken a single snap. So naturally the questions came flying in afterward. Why activate him if he was not going to play? Was there an actual plan to give him some reps? And Harbaugh gave one of those classic answers that sounds simple but plants a seed at the same time. He said Jones was ready to go if needed. And then dropped that little line about seeing where it goes from here. That alone would have sparked curiosity. But things got a lot more interesting when Harbaugh was pressed about the possibility of rotating players along the line, and instead of shutting it down, he opened the door wider, saying everything was on the table. It is funny, because he said the same thing a few years back when the Ravens were experimenting with rotations, before most teams even considered doing something like that, and because they have done it before, you cannot rule out the possibility that we might see it again, even if rotations are one of those things fans love to argue about. Personally, I am not huge on shuffling linemen in and out. Offensive lines thrive on rhythm, communication, and continuity, and it is hard to build that when you are switching pieces every other drive. But with the way things have gone this season, you can understand why the staff might consider anything that could spark improvement. And even if I am not in love with the idea, it would not shock me one bit to see them try it, especially with how inconsistent the group has been. The choice to elevate Jones over Ben Cleveland told a bigger story than people realize. Cleveland was supposed to be a veteran option with a reliable presence, and instead he is suddenly behind a rookie who has never played a snap in the league. That raises more than a few eyebrows. Either Cleveland has fallen completely out of favor, or the team sees something in Jones that they genuinely believe could grow into a bigger role, and honestly, it might be both. When a staff loses trust in a lineman, it becomes obvious quickly. And this feels like one of those situations. What adds another layer to this is where Jones lined up during warm-ups. Left guard, not right guard. That means if a rotation does happen, the first spot under the microscope is Andrew Voorhees, and to be fair, his performance lately has not exactly made his position feel secure. Fans complaining about Falele might want to look a little closer at what has happened at the other guard position, because Voorhees has had some tough outings, and that opens the door for Jones in a real way, not as a gimmick, not as a desperation move, but as a legitimate opportunity to help the unit stabilize. There was even a moment late in that Jets game where it felt like the perfect time to give Jones a few snaps. The Ravens were deep in scoring range, the outcome already sealed, the offense working through one more drive to close it out. That would have been an ideal time to get the rookie's feet wet, but they held off, which might mean they want to introduce him in a more controlled situation, instead of throwing him into a late-game moment just for the sake of it. The offensive line as a whole continues to be a puzzle that nobody has solved yet. You look at the grades from Sunday and see flashes here and there, but no consistency. Ronnie Stanley had a solid outing in pass protection, and Linderbaum held his own. But the drop-off across the board makes it hard for the offense to stay afloat, and in the run game, it is even more frustrating. This team built its identity on being able to run downhill, and right now they cannot generate any surge at the line of scrimmage. When your center grades out in the 40s on run blocking, you know you have a problem. You see Full and Voorhees struggling. You see the guards unable to seal lanes. And suddenly every run feels like a fight for survival rather than a designed attack. And it is impossible not to tie all of that back to Lamar Jackson. You can see the strain the injuries are putting on him week after week. Something new pops up, first the hamstring, then the knee, then the ankle, and now the toe. You do not get on the injury report that many times in a row unless your body is paying a real price. And when he gets up slowly after hits, you can see the weight of all of it. The coaching staff clearly does not want him taking unnecessary risks. And he does not look like he trusts his body fully right now either. What stood out most on Sunday was the complete disappearance of the read option. That has always been a key part of the Ravens' offense, something that forces defenses to hold their breath for just long enough to create opportunities. If Lamar is not keeping the ball, if he is not putting that threat on film, the run game becomes predictable and much easier to defend. You could practically see the defense relax every time he handed it off because they never believed he was going to keep it. And you cannot help but compare it to last season in the postseason when the weather was rough, and the Ravens never leaned into the read option. It was hard to understand then, and it is even harder to understand now, especially when the offense is clearly lacking an identity without it. If Lamar were healthy, if the line were generating push, if the backfield had momentum, maybe they could get away without using it, but right now, it feels like they need every tool available, and some of those tools are collecting dust on the shelf. The craziest part of all this is that the Ravens are still winning. They are on a roll, stacking victory after victory, staying alive in the playoff race. And that makes the coaching decisions even trickier. When you are winning, it becomes hard to justify making drastic changes. You do not want to break rhythm. You do not want to introduce chaos. And you definitely do not want to panic. But at the same time, you cannot ignore problems that keep repeating themselves week after week, especially on a unit as critical as the offensive line. And with a short week ahead and a division-heavy stretch coming up, every snap matters. Any weakness is going to be exposed quickly, especially by teams that know you better than anyone. That is why even a small adjustment, like giving Emory Jones a rotation series, feels like something worth keeping an eye on. Whether it happens in the next game or during that mini break afterward, the writing is on the wall. Something has to change up front if this offense is going to get back to the level it was playing at last season. The situation around Lamar Jackson's health has become one of the biggest undercurrents of this entire season, almost like an invisible storyline that keeps tightening the tension week after week. Every time the new injury report comes out, fans hold their breath waiting to see what part of his body is hurting now. And when the update dropped on Monday, seeing a toe injury added to the list almost felt unreal. You start stacking it all together: hamstring, knee, ankle, toe, and you begin to realize how much physical punishment he's absorbed since the very first snap of the year. It is no wonder he does not look like himself. When your quarterback can barely plant his foot without wincing, you know your offense is living on borrowed time. The interactions during games tell the story even louder than the reports. There are moments when Lamar takes a hit, rolls over slowly, pushes himself off the turf, and you can see him trying to mask that discomfort behind a focused expression. He has always been tough, the kind of player who refuses to come off the field unless he absolutely has to. But this season it feels like he is playing through a level of pain that would sideline most other quarterbacks, and the problem is, the more he pushes himself, the more obvious it becomes that the coaching staff is scaling back what they call for him. It is not just the read option disappearing. It is the hesitation to let him move freely outside the pocket, the reluctance to design runs that were once staples of this offense. And you can tell the defense has noticed too. There used to be a sense of panic any time Lamar pulled the ball and froze a linebacker with that slight hesitation move. Now, defenders are crashing in without thinking twice, because the threat of him keeping it just does not feel real at the moment, and that shift changes everything. The running backs lose those easy lanes they used to get when half the defense had to respect Lamar on the edge. The offensive line feels more pressure because the timing of the run game is off, and the entire offense becomes limited, like a car trying to drive with one flat tire. The irony is that despite all these issues, the team keeps stringing together wins. That is what makes this stretch so complicated to evaluate. You watch the games and see the struggles, the hesitations, the breakdowns, yet the scoreboard keeps leaning in the Ravens' favor. Winning can hide problems, but it never fixes them, and at some point, one of these lingering issues is going to matter in a big way if something doesn't shift soon. especially with the schedule tightening and division opponents lining up back-to-back. This team cannot afford to limp into games expecting grit to carry them every week. That is why these conversations about the offensive line matter more than people realize. Every time Lamar needs that extra split second in the pocket, every time the run game needs just a sliver of daylight, those 5 guys determine how the play unfolds, and lately, it feels like someone up there is always out of sync. One guy misses a punch, another gets pushed back, another whiffs on a stunt, and suddenly the whole structure collapses. You can have the best scheme, the best weapons, the best quarterback, but if the front wall is cracking, everything behind it becomes fragile. The thought of introducing rotations across the line becomes more interesting when you look at the details of the recent performances. Voorhees had one of his roughest games, and Full has spent most of the year in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. And while both have had moments where they look serviceable, neither has been consistent enough to counter the idea of giving someone else a chance. For Jones to be active at all already signals that the staff sees something in him worth exploring. They would not burn an active spot on a rookie unless they believed he could help sooner or later. And sometimes the spark comes from the unexpected, not the comfortable, not the familiar. But this is where the challenge gets complicated. You cannot experiment recklessly when you are trying to maintain momentum. You cannot take a winning streak lightly by shuffling linemen without purpose. This is why Harbaugh's comments matter. He did not commit to change, but he didn't shut the door either. It is that gray area that keeps fans guessing. The Ravens have always operated like a team that values stability on the offensive line, but they also have a track record of trying unorthodox solutions when necessary. And this year feels like one of those moments where necessity might outweigh preference. Another piece of this puzzle is how banged up the roster is beyond Lamar. The injury report continues to grow, and the names on it are not minor contributors. Kyle Hamilton's situation has added another layer of uncertainty heading into the upcoming slate of games. Even if he ends up playing, the fact that he's dealing with something at all changes the defensive approach. He has been one of the most important pieces on that side of the ball. And when a team leans heavily on its defense to compensate for an inconsistent offense, losing or even limiting a player like Hamilton can shift an entire game plan. And then comes the reality of the short week. Thursday night games feel like mini survival tests. The preparation is rushed, recovery time almost doesn't exist, and coaching staffs are forced to make decisions based on incomplete information. If Lamar needs a maintenance day, if the offensive line needs extra prep, if the defense needs adjustments, everything has to be done in a compressed window, and that window is often unforgiving for teams that are battling lingering injuries. It is one thing to get ready for a normal week, but when you have to accelerate the schedule, there is no space to overthink or second guess. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens. And hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. The Baltimore Ravens fan base is buzzing like never before as whispers circulate around the team's quarterback situation. Sources close to the organization suggest that head coach John Harbaugh has reportedly identified 5 potential quarterbacks who could step in and lead the squad in the near future, while no official announcement has been made. Insiders hint that the list is a mix of seasoned veterans and promising young talent, leaving supporters both excited and anxious about what's to come. Ravens fans have long been known for their passion and intensity, and the mere suggestion that the team might be exploring multiple options under center has sent the community into overdrive. Social media platforms are flooded with speculation, debates, and mock draft scenarios as enthusiasts try to decipher who might make the cut. Some argue that Harbaugh could be leaning toward a seasoned player capable of immediate impact, while others believe the strategy might focus on grooming a rising star, someone who could shape the franchise's future for years. The chatter has sparked heated discussions among analysts and former players alike, each weighing in on the potential fits for the iconic purple and black. Questions swirl about system compatibility, leadership qualities, and how quickly a new quarterback could adapt to Harbaugh's demanding style. Every mention of a name ignites fresh waves of optimism and concern, illustrating just how high the stakes feel among fans, even within the team. The atmosphere is reportedly electric, with players aware of the speculation but keeping public comments measured. The intrigue isn't just limited to the locker room, it's permeating bars, tailgates, and online forums as supporters imagine the possibilities. Could the Ravens finally land a franchise quarterback? Will a bold gamble pay off? Or is Harbaugh simply keeping everyone guessing to maintain leverage in negotiations? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: Baltimore is abuzz, and the frenzy shows no signs of slowing. Rumors of 5 potential quarterbacks under consideration have turned routine chatter into full-blown frenzy, with the fanbase eagerly awaiting the next move. For now, the mystery remains, but the excitement is undeniable. Ravens Nation is watching, tweeting, and speculating every step of the way. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.